Welcome back to Marta, Skassa, PM at Zalando. We had a really nice chat last time as part of the first leadership series. So welcome back to the Product Leadership Series, Marta. This time we're focusing on everything customer insight. Awesome.
Really interesting topic. One of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, everybody I've spoken to is very passionate about this topic, which is great. We want to be selling this, getting more people actually getting out there and speaking to customers. Part of this series, we spoke to Umberto at booking.com, another machine learning ML specialist. It was interesting for me to hear, as a complete novice to this, I was learning a lot, but, it seemed to me there are lots of similarities, right? Whether you're doing an ML product or any kind of product, I suppose. So what do you think in relation to customer insight? What's the key thing to always be thinking about, whatever team you're in, whatever product you're working on?
Mm-hmm. So as you rightfully said, it's machine learning is a complex area. It can maybe get a little bit overwhelming in the beginning when you are just starting with it. But I think a key thing to remember for me, and this is the tip I would give, is when you are solving a customer problem, whether you use machine learning or not, this is just the how part. So this is just how you solve a given problem, the solution, the technology. But the most important thing is actually trying to understand in the very first place, what is this customer problem that you want to solve, and validating it. So for me, it's always important to think, okay, what is the customer problem you are trying to solve? Really trying to make sure I'm confident that this is the right customer problem or need that I want to focus on. And it comes at the later stage to think, okay, how can we solve it through machine learning? So when it comes to validating the problem, I think the techniques and methodologies and the toolkits that we are using are exactly the same. It doesn't matter if at the end of the day you will use AI or not. And it often happens that maybe you start with something smaller that doesn't require ML, and your product is so successful that you eventually move on to something that leverages the power of machine learning. But at the very at the very beginning, the validation of the problem stays the same. And this you can achieve through running user interviews or focus groups or doing surveys and so on and so forth. So I would say the usual.
Yeah. I think, you say it's the usual, but I think again, it's so many people they've read about these things and skip over it. I really like the model. So the next episode actually will be Christina Valkamaya, and she talked about your introduction actually. So she talked about this thing called the truth curve, where it's the different stages of user research that you're doing, going from anything from just a open conversation all the way through to A/B testing. I think it's a really nice framework just to frame what you should be doing at each stage. So you're starting very uncertain, you gradually go towards certainty. So you mentioned a few things like user research, focus groups, etc. What do you, maybe first question would be what do you apply personally at Zalando, right? Because it's obviously that context is unique, fashion. So maybe talk through what you've applied at Zalando, and then also any other techniques that that you enjoy, that you think are useful.
Yeah. So I like this example that from Christina you just mentioned. I think yes, it usually starts with a hunch that you start to validate, and I think especially in the very beginning, you can start quite broad. So of course you have to define your customer group and so on, but once you have it, you just need to start talking to people. And what I personally love are customer interviews. And now in Zalando, and because of Corona, right, we do everything remotely, and it works. It's possible. You can do good, in-depth and short and all kinds of interviews quite nicely via Zoom or whatever tool. But I personally much more prefer to actually be in the room with the person, either as an observer or as an interviewer. It depends. We have a bunch of people who are experts in UX research, so they usually would help us doing that. But in the past, I also did a lot of interviews myself, and I really enjoy it. And then, if you don't have a big team that can support you, there are so many other ways to do it. Again, now Corona, things are a little bit different and challenging, but I remember in the past, for example, going to Starbucks and trying to like look around and see, okay, this can be like our target customer, or
Yeah.
this
Find
person,
someone
this
that looks
person.
friendly.
Yeah. Yeah, friendly, the age group, all those characteristics. And then it just like you ask, could we talk with you? Usually I was with a friend. One person would be talking, the other taking notes. You offer them a coffee voucher, and usually people say yes. I mean, of course, if someone is in a hurry, they will decline, but there were surprisingly many people who are saying yes, and they were like super happy to do it. And then you have an iPad, for example, and show some prototypes, depends on the kind of interview. And I don't know, I really like it, this kind of guerrilla style interviews. It's so much fun. It's like
definitely.
you really learn, and you have like this feeling of like moving on, making progress. So this would be one way, like just approaching people on the street, in a cafe. You have to, of course, like be prepared that some people will say no, but it's a part of the game, I would say.
Yeah. I find it definitely easier in places like London, Portugal, Brazil than Germany. But no, people are generally very friendly. People are curious as well, right? They're usually curious because they've never done a user test or seen a user test.
Yeah, people are curious, and if you are seeing someone just sitting in a cafe, you can kind of assume maybe they have some time, and people like to get free stuff like coffee, and it's not too much, so I don't think like there is this feeling that you're influencing them with whatever you give them. So I think it's a good exchange. Yes, language can be sometimes a barrier, because I was approaching people in English, so you always have to like start like, hi, do you speak English? We're doing this. We work for Zalando. Would you be interested? Like kind of nice intro. And then of course, some people will say, my English is not good enough. Usually, actually, from my experience, it's not true. The English is really good. They can. It's, I think maybe it's a German thing. I don't know. But yeah, this is one of the favorite parts of like product management for me. Now, of course, with Corona, it's not you cannot just approach people. That would be probably bound to fail.
No, I think on that though, it's just for people listening, it's like everyone's read about this, right? Do user test, go to a cafe, but like it is that easy, and it's common thread I've seen through these 10 conversations now is what I start to observe with those who are great product people and those who are not so great is ultimately just going and doing it. It's so easy to not do it, right? To not go to a cafe, to not get out on the street. And people go like, well, it's easy for you because you can be like, we're from Zalando, and you start the conversation, people recognize the name, but that doesn't actually matter. Ultimately go up to people, be polite, and you'll be absolutely fine. Like 4 out of 5, they're going to be more than happy to take time, or they're going to
and I would not underestimate the fact that people love to give their opinion and be perceived like knowledgeable. So if you're like phrase it right, they're like, okay, I will tell you what's the right thing.
Definitely. So. I mean, also I've given advice before, like make it, if you're starting out, for you and I now, if you've done it a lot, you've got no problem even doing it in the street, right? It's just a habit that you build. But if you are intimidated, one good tactic is things like, I've done this before where you say, it's part of a co-working at the time, you sit there with a bowl with like free croissants and just have a sign saying free croissant for 15 minutes of your time, do the user test.
Super cool.
Nothing intimidating, because they're coming up to you, or it's really funny, people like hovering, sort of looking at the bowl, not quite sure. And then you have a conversation starter. So it's very,
that's a really nice one.
super easy. I mean, even for example, when things go back to normal, say Zalando big office, it's still helpful testing with anyone. Ideally target customer, yes, but you're going to uncover quite a few obvious issues by testing with anyone. So I mean, as a place to start, just set up somewhere in your office or public space, and some sort of nice, easy offer.
Another piece of advice I would say would be doing it with someone else. So don't do it alone. It's always good to have a buddy. And I remember some time ago we were doing this kind of guerrilla interviews on the streets of Mitte in Berlin, and I was in a pair with one of our data scientists, and he was like in the beginning, no, I cannot do it, this is awkward, I will not just grab people on the street. And after an hour of doing this, was like, oh my god, this is so exciting, can we ask more people? And I was like, okay, I think our time is up. And he really enjoyed it, and for me it was great to also experience that you can involve people who are not product managers. So you could, for example, grab an engineer from your team and do it together.
100%. I mean, it's, again, it's really, you see, the more senior people get in product, so much of it comes down to these kind of soft skills. Like, yes, you want to be effective in like drawing out insights from a, discovery call or a user test, but it is also just simply about like being bold, standing up for your opinion, just doing what you think is right ultimately, and following the right process. I think that's where really start to separate the good from the great, because all of that also compounds. So it's, the more you going out onto the street and doing user tests, like, yes, you're getting better insights for the product, but you are becoming more confident, you're becoming a better communicator, you're getting yourself out of your comfort zone as well. And there's a huge amount of power behind that kind of behavior.
And I think this also helps you to validate like the first assumptions, and of course then you can move forward to being maybe more focused. Okay, these are now a bunch of hypotheses we already managed to invalidate through those quick interviews. Let's focus on the most important things that we either need more validation, and then you can do this proper kind of interview. I mean, what we do at Zalando, we recruit through agency, but you can do it in many other ways. And then you invite people, sit with them, spend an hour or half an hour. But then I think you are more focused, and you are not going like, super broad. This is what you can do probably in a cafe in the very beginning.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what are your thoughts as well on, like, personally, I think it's really important for the PM to be in on those conversations. I've never really seen it work where just my personal experience, not seen it work when you separate, right? You outsource it completely and then review the results. Do you always make yourself involved in the calls, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I know this happens, but I would never do that. I mean, I would never risk, and maybe it's kind of a FOMO attitude from my side as well, but I would not be comfortable with saying, I don't know, giving a brief to UX researcher and saying, okay, this is the target group, these are the like hypotheses, can you please validate, invalidate, and come back to me with results, right? No matter like how good this person is, like it's not about the researcher, but it's about me. Like, I want to hear and experience, and I think it's always better to have more people listening in, because first of all, you don't catch everything usually when there's like one just person observing or listening. And then you can also discuss about what you've heard, right? To do those interpretations and synthesis of the findings. So I personally, I'm always involved. Sometimes I'm involved more. So when I'm used to run my like interviews on my own, this happened a lot, then I'm either talking or at least taking notes, or I was more observing. But if this was a topic or a project I was responsible for, or driving or involved somehow, I always try to be there. And what I also try to do is to involve engineers, because I saw how important this is and how beneficial, especially in the future, it is when you have people who heard it like firsthand. Like, I remember we're doing once a design sprint, and there were, I think, 2 engineers involved, and then one of those guys, he was like, and you remember this interview when this girl, she said this? And I was like, exactly. This is you cannot compare it to like reading or even watching a video.
Yeah, I mean, that comes into, we're going to definitely do a series on this, but I think it's just storytelling and communication, and how important it is. Just these small examples of like, here is a real customer, and them saying something, for example, or painting a picture of that is so powerful. Like a really small thing, super powerful.
The best if they can be in the room, but of course videos then also work quite fine. Everything is better than just reading a quote from a random
exactly
person.
Really seeing the person. I think also brings it home like why you're doing all this work as well, which I think is ultimately very rewarding. Just a specific question on that testing. Like, do you tend to, in terms of drawing out key insights, do you tend to batch that in a day? Do you block out like a day? Do you get X amount, certain people blocking out that day so that you can not obviously run the sessions, but discuss them and sort of come out with concrete conclusions? Like, how do you manage the process?
So I think first of all, there's this rule that you should talk to at least 8 people from the same target group to get like some kind of, to see the patterns. So I try to have this more or less number of participants. And I mean, it really depends. So we usually try to do like let's say a week of interviews. So I don't know, we would have 3 or 4 interviews per day, depending also on the length, is it, half an hour or an hour. And then after each interview, we would have a debrief session. So that would be me and maybe the user researcher and whoever was observing, where we go through the hypothesis, we discuss everything that we've heard. You already try to like write down the most important things that stood out. And after, I mean, maybe sometimes at the end of the day to have like a big debrief, that depends, to like summarize what we've heard throughout the day. And then at the end of, for example, this week, we would have a proper synthesis session, and then it's more than an hour. And back in the days, we would just go in the room, have all the post-its and notes, and try to cluster the themes and play around with like what we've heard. Now it's not happening, of course. I miss that a lot, but it's still possible to do it via like the tools we have.
It's a really interesting point as well. The whole remote thing. There are things that are missed. I think there's a big hype, particularly people that are new to remote. It's already exciting. Maybe not now, but I think people will start to see the value of doing some things in person. Like, that kind of thing. It's like, we're going to take a day to be in the office and do user tests, for example. You can do remote, but these kind of sort of soft, these harder to pin down sort of insights and creative kind of things that there's a lot of value, I think, doing it in person. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
I really enjoy like that you have this board of post-its,
and the visual,
you move things around. Exactly. But it's still possible to do it remotely.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also difficult, not having it in a physical space. It's like when you're in the office, always having that as a reminder of like, these are the important things for our customers, for example, on post-it notes from that session, I think can be valuable. I think you raised a really important point as well. A few things there. So, there are specific methodologies and tactics you're using. Great. But also the fact that ultimately it's fun. I think when you do one or two, you just realize, wow, you learn so much and people have such different perspectives and interpret it in such a different way that it's fun and sort of really feeds into curiosity, which I think is a really integral part of, again, actually bothering to go and do it. Same with anything. You're not going to do it if you dread it and you find it boring to do. So I think that's really important. And I think that second point I touched upon earlier, you being bold and just doing it and realizing that things don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have the perfect process in any way. Maybe just final topic would be on, like, sort of on that point, are there any, when it comes further into, okay, so we understand the problem, now we want to move into the solution phase. Any specific like lean tactics that you apply, even within machine learning, to validate solution ideas, for example?
Yeah. So as I said in the beginning, I think like the first part of the process is not very different from any other product development process. Moving forward, yes, you probably want to validate your idea. And I don't think for that you necessarily need to have a whole like machine learning product or infrastructure in place. So what I've been doing a lot is, for example, like what I like to call fake it till you make it approach. So starting with something that is not machine learning based. So in my case, we were just building the data set manually and not having an algorithm doing that for us, and testing this as an A/B test. So this is one approach. So create a simple data set manually, whatever that is, and try to test it with a small amount of people, either live or like in an A/B test, or again like with user interviews or a survey to get a little bit more data, like, yeah, not only interviews, like qualitative insights. That would be one suggestion. And then another idea and like another approach that I would recommend is, I think it's called Wizard of Oz approach. So yeah, so like you pretend it's a machine, but actually there's someone like behind the scenes. So I think it works quite well. For example, I don't know, you want to build a beauty consultant, like one-on-one beauty consultant that is a machine. So I ask about my problem, skin care problem, for example, and you get some answers. But probably when you start, you don't have all this infrastructure, data, and whatnot you need to build the algorithm and the solution. But you can just get an expert in beauty, in skincare, answering those questions.
Yeah, and save a lot of time and money in the process.
Yes, exactly. And you save a lot of time, and this is just to validate. Of course, there are some things to think about, like probably a person would always, like for sure, human will be better in answering those questions. So you have to like set some guidelines and like what is the amount of information we want to give to customer and so on. But I think it's always a good mental exercise in the first place, and then probably something I would recommend.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more,
just thinking, how can you simplify?
Completely. I mean, this is what, we like don't let people use the word MVP because there is such a miss, because very few people have actually gone and like read really read into the fundamentals of it. So MVP is usually translated as like, what is the first technical solution that we build? It's almost always focusing on the wrong thing of like feasibility and like how will this function as a technical digital product, rather than really what it is like, how can we prove a key point of customer value, for example. And I think, as you said, it's very, I find it a challenge with students that the amount of conversations I have, like, why are we building out this they're building like a no-code prototype of it, or, full digital Figma prototype. It's like, you can literally do this manually. Like on a call, for example, like talking them through a process of selecting healthcare options, like do that manually on a call as a first step. Second step, you can do a no-code prototype with a sort of simple database. And then way further down the line, you can think about coding it. I think just having that principle of like avoid code at all costs is a very good one. I think particularly in your case, right, with ML, where it's just these massive
it's expensive.
It's expensive as well. Yeah, good point. Very good point. Excellent.
Expensive, time consuming. So sure. I would always recommend like try to think like what kind of problem you want to solve, right? And machine learning is again just one of the ways. So and probably it's not the smartest idea to start from the most challenging part.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a great place to finish on, really where we started, right? Sort of coming back to the problem, validate the problem first. Thank you so much, Marta. And shall I send people through to your LinkedIn if they want to follow you?
Yes, absolutely. If someone wants to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah, awesome. Super cool to talk again.
Yeah. Well, I'll add the link through the below the video when we post it. Yeah, as always, a pleasure. Really, really, really fun, really interesting conversation. Thanks, Marta.
Thanks so much for inviting me.